So for this video specifically, we will be talking about Majuub. Now, Majuub was basically a meme in the community for so long because he was a character in the game that was just very, what is this? You don't use him. Leader skill, 3 key when 80% or above. That means if you get hit a couple times, you don't get key anymore. Extreme modifier. Lowers attack, which is cool. Crazy restriction, 80% or above once again. And my computer's about to die, so I'll plug it in really quick. But he had a lot of problems with him, and I'm actually honestly very happy with the way that his card turned out. And he was actually very underrated because prior to Super Saiyan 4's coming out, I'd say that, a lot of people looked at him like, oh, well, he's still not very good because there's the whole passive that gives you a flat increase and things like that. And the way that the game treats those, because the game is heavily based off of mathematics, basically. Percentages are the way to go. And I've talked about that. Other people have talked about it, so I won't really get too deep into that. But, he wasn't very useful even upon getting the rebirth. But now, with the way that the game works and with the fact that we have Super Saiyan 4 Goku in the game, who gives this guy 120%, and which if you have double Goku leads, that's 240% on top of nice base stats, Majuub's rebirth, awakening, gets pretty solid. So we're going to talk about Majuub and the way that he works. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Subscribe if you like it, if you're new, of course, and leave a like if you liked it. If you didn't like it, feel free to dislike. That's fine. Okay, so this is what he turns into. So let's compare the cards. Extreme modifier, as I said, 80% or above on the restriction, and that was 3,000 attack and defense. A lot of this comes down to the power creep in the game. That's why these rebirths come out, so they can make old cards viable. Because the game just treats old cards very bad because the way the game's progressed throughout the couple of years it's been out. And 9,600 HP was pretty solid. That's a pretty solid stat to begin with anyway. 6,000 attack, 3,000 defense. They made these stats with this passive in mind, giving him 3,000 more and stuff like that. And 3 key in the game was, at the time that he came out, 3 key was basically the best leader skill available. It just sucked that he had that restriction on it. Okay, so now you look at his rebirth. They just took the restriction off. That's fine. If they probably made him today, they'd probably give him like Cooler has 3 key and 20% to all stats, I believe. So that's another one of those instances where they're harking on the power creep in this game, because you look at this, like I said, they probably would just give him 20% to all stats, in which Arale has like 30% to all stats and 3 key to everybody. So she's still, I guess, the best rainbow leader in the game. It's just another one of those things. But what they did do is they gave him Supreme now with the Majin Beam. He still lowers attack. It doesn't greatly lower. And now he has a 30% or above restriction on the passive, which basically equates to no restriction. When you have 250,000, 60,000, 270,000 HP, depending on your units and how much implementation you have from the ability system, the dupe system, on those said units on the team, when you're running double Super Saiyan 4 leads, 30% is nothing. You're never going to get below that, or you shouldn't. So basically that equates to no restriction. And it's 7,000 increases now. His stats, attack and defense, don't jump a whole lot, but the HP does get over 10,000, which is cool as well. Because once again, statistics from the leader skills, 240% HP, attack, and defense. He equates to, I'm not going to do the math as far as the HP goes, but I just know that the defensive stat, which is mainly what I'm going to talk about here, gets to around 21,000. So basically, factoring that in, Majuub becomes what the tank that STR can kind of rely on, if you will, because STR is a very hard-hitting team. They're a very balanced team as far as damage output goes. They don't really rely on a lot of defense, but this is why I say, depending on the dupe system, he can be the best tank on the team for them, or one of the best tanks, because they have him, they have the STR Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta, and the GT one can be really good too. I'd even go as far as to say that the GT one is a better option because of the attack increase. Now, as far as this goes, okay, Majuub allows you to run a team that actually does not utilize Omega Shenron. Omega Shenron is a very good card. That doesn't mean that Majuub is better than him. It just means that Goku, as a leader, appreciates Majuub a little bit more than he does Omega Shenron, or at least Majuub appreciates him a little more than Omega does, because Omega gets 1 key, 50% from 1 Goku, so it's not very much increase. That doesn't mean, once again, that Majuub has more value than Omega, because on a face level, Omega shits on Majuub, right? He can't compete. Majuub can't compete to him. It's just Majuub fits very well with the lowering of the attack. And similar thing, he's basically Rildo, if you will. He's like a hero version of Rildo because gets a similar defensive increase, gets to about a similar defensive stat after the increase, and his attack stat gets a little bit harder, or higher, excuse me, so he hits a little harder. He also lowers the attack on the enemy, so he's basically Rildo. Now, with having Majuub on the team, you have a lot of options because you can run a team similar to this. This is just a team I threw together. It's not the best team. It could get a few more improvements in here. For example, depending on what you have, right? This is just me looking at all of the cards available. Depending on what you have, you may be able to drop the Trunks for the Vegeta Super Saiyan Blue, drop the Trunks for Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta GT, drop the Trunks or the Gohan or for the the Gotenks here STR. If you want to go a little more defensive, Super Pycon is a good option for the team. They slide in there depending on what you have. But these teams like this, these quotes up Neo God leaders, appreciate one type, right? They're mono leaders, and they appreciate whether it's a super unit or an extreme unit. That's why I'm saying that, dropping, what's his name? Majuub, excuse me, for somebody like one of these other guys like this Vegeta here, who links really well, could be a viable option. Now, speaking of links, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. Majuub gets an increase in links too because he actually gets the Fused Fighter and Shattering the Limit links. Both of those are viable links on STR. Most importantly, Fused Fighter. Fused Fighter is very good for him because it allows him to be the guy that bridges gaps, and he links for Ki with most of this team because a lot of them are GT units. Like, there's 5 GT units on the screen right here, like 5 GT units. Gohan is self-sufficient, so he supplies Ki for himself, so he doesn't really need that. And Majuub links with Gogeta with one link, which is Fused Fighter. So, it works really well with him. And like I said, you just have options. You can drop Majuub. You can drop him for the GT Vegeta, who honestly does something similar. Get 70% attack and defense on top of those increases. His restriction, I think, is 50%, which isn't as good, of course, but he still hits really hard. I'd go as far as to say he's the best tank you can run on a hero-centric team. Now, the problem with STR Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta as opposed to the GT one is, this is something I talked about earlier. This kind of is a comment on best team in the game, period. STR, physical, AGL, it doesn't really matter, but you have to understand that the game's main focus is damage output, right? Whatever team can output the most damage fastest wins. You see that time after time. Sometimes, of course, RNG factors in with criticals and double hits and stuff like that. I don't want to talk about that too much, but you see that time after time with, like, my races, for example. Whoever's luckier with the dupe system and stuff, but whoever can put out most damage is what it comes down to. That's who wins. That's the whole concept of that. Now, that does not mean that AGL isn't a more balanced team than STR, because they are. They have more defensive options. Super Vegito, of course, is still one of the best cards in the game. He may not be the best anymore after reigning supreme for so long, but he's still one of the best cards, period. And Vegeta, with his tanking ability, doesn't hit as hard as Goku, but he's right up there as one of the hardest hitters. You have double Vegetas. So, that's all well and dandy, right? But this team, in particular, outputs so much damage because Gogeta's hitting for 1,000,000 damage at Super Attack 10 with some dupe system integration. By the way, Gogeta gets some of the best increases from the dupe system, period, which also allow his defensive stat to get really high, which once again allows him to be a good normal attack tank anyway, which is another reason why you don't need that Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta to tank for 7 turns, because you have Goku as a tank, because Goku can tank really well too. People think he's only damage. He can tank really well because he has a nice defensive stat and he increases his defense upon a super. So Goku can tank well. You have Gogeta tanking well. You can run the GT Vegeta, who will hit harder at the expense of not being able to stun or having over in a flash, but that doesn't matter on this team because he has GT. He'll hit harder, which is all that really matters in this game. All it cares about is damage output. You don't really need that. And Majuub kind of slides in there as something that can hit a little harder too. He doesn't have Super Saiyan, which obviously is a deterrent for him, a detriment, but I just want to kind of make sure that people understand the way this works. That doesn't mean that, you can't run Omega. For all intents and purposes, feel free to run Omega or Rildo if you need a tank. The Vegeta, either one of the Super Saiyan 3s is fine. It just comes down to what you have as an option available to you. So anyways, I'm going to get up out of here. STR and Physical are pretty much the fastest teams in the game. Does that equate to the best is up to you. I don't really particularly care. They're all the best teams in the game to me because every new banner, there's a new best team in the game, so it doesn't really matter. There's no point in arguing that. As far as STR, I look at Majuub as being a very viable option on a really hard-hitting team. He will hit for about, at Super Attack 1, from my experience, he hits for about 160k on this team. He also gets about 21,000 defense. 21,000 defense allows you to tank just about every normal hit in the game for double-digit damage, which is, 70 damage or 100 damage or some triple digits, something like that, to where it doesn't matter. You're not taking any damage. And the same goes for that GT Vegeta, who gets a lot of hate because he doesn't have over in the flash, which doesn't matter because a lot of GT units are here. That's just kind of how this works out. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I love to hear from you guys. What team you're running as far as STR goes and stuff like that. Were you pleasantly surprised by the Majuub rebirth that he got as well? And all that other stuff. So anyways, have an awesome day. Thank you for checking out the video. Subscribe if you're new. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Dislike if you disagreed, I guess. But anyways, have an awesome day. Take care, guys. Peace.